Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So the preview test server just got an update. This was following the update we just had yesterday to the live server, where we have ended up with wizards dealing twice as much damage as they did before, at least in multi-target content. However, this update to the previous server, will most likely be coming live next week, brings with it, as forewarned, changes that are gonna reduce that. But it also comes with some just raw nerfs to wizard as a whole. So we're gonna cover everything in this video, those wizard changes, some enchanter hex changes too, and also an adjustment to the shadow demon companion. Now there were changes also made to Barbarian and Songblade, which I'll cover in separate videos, otherwise this one will end up far too long. So you can look forward to seeing those in the near future. So first things first, we're going to talk about Hex. That simply got a nerf that's adjusting it down to just 50 magnitude. Now this is not as big of a nerf as you may think, because with the recent update just yesterday to the live server, it got a 35% damage increase, even though its magnitude went down to 75, because it could now benefit from your crit severity because it can critically hit. So its damage went up. Now they're going to be reducing that magnitude further down to 50. But it's not going to be that big of a difference compared to how we had Hex originally, which was 100 magnitude and didn't critically hit. And also do note the older version could never hit on like adds, only control immune enemies. Now this new version can hit against everything so long as you're using a control power. Still favors an extra damage boost for classes who do have those control powers. But let's move on to the next section, wizard changes. We are getting some nerfs. So we have the changes right here. Now on a quick note, there was the companion, the shadow demon, which you could use to get 90% deflect severity. Now you cannot get that reliably anymore, as that's going to drop off. It's only going to work for one deflect, like it says in the tooltip. So if you were using it, you might want to switch to something else. But the wizard changes, yes. The class feature Critical Conflagration, as I did say and I did warn in my previous patch notes video, they will be looking at changing it. This feature has been technically reworked to address numerous issues with when it triggered its effect. However, they also went and just completely removed the crit severity. It is a bit strange, but I guess that's in the effort to just reduce wizards' damage overall. But they've also changed this feature to work more properly how it says it does, and also to prevent it from double triggering Enchanter's Hex on certain abilities. You can see now when you critically hit with a control power, it will no longer trigger Enchanter's Hex more than once. This used to be double all the time. You can see exactly here what it was doing with Critical Conflagration. Many abilities were getting twice the hits from Enchanter's Hex, meaning it was dealing like 150 more extra magnitude. Additionally, that comes with the fix to then Arcane Singularity to prevent it from triggering it so many times. It will now properly only trigger Enchanter's Hex once. You can see that right at the beginning there, and you get your Enchanter's Hex and then that final hit of Arcane Singularity, and you'll get a smolder hit with that as well. That still has some bugs, that it's going to trigger glowing flames with it, but they seem to have done something that it won't trigger it nearly as much, which will result in a lot less damage against, for example, these 5 enemies here. You can see it's not nearly giving as much damage numbers as it did before. Still a decent amount, puts all the enemies at half, but it's not killing them like you may have seen in my previous tests. Just look at the damage here of Arcane Singularity. We dealt a total of nearly 700,000. Singularity itself was 500,000, but that's only because everything was still alive for it to actually hit that over 1,000 magnitude damage. You got some smolder, some glowing flames. You can see only 12 hits of glowing flames, and then we got 5 hits of Enchanter's Hex, which is correct with it only hitting once per target, versus this is how it was before. You had Enchanter's Hex was crazy there, was getting like 23 hits per target if the target wasn't dead before then. And then Glowing Flames hitting like 110 times against all those targets. Again, it could do more if the guys weren't dead. Smolder's about the same, 11 hits. We're getting here in our test 10 hits, and then Arcane Singularity on this test only hit once because everything was dead before that. But yeah, that's a massive reduction from Enchanter's Hex and Glowing Flames with Arcane Singularity. Now we can take out the Enchanter's Hex. That was never really a thing before until this week, until yesterday when that update came. But still, Glowing Flames, over 500,000 damage has been reduced to now just 37,000. So you're basically losing more than double the damage on that daily power. Your multi-target damage is nowhere near going to be as powerful as it was before in terms of daily powers. So you will really notice this daily power not performing anywhere near it did. Additionally, Critical Conflagration affects directed flames a bit in some odd ways, causing it to deal less damage. So I would highly recommend, if you're in single target fights, make sure you're using Rime Fire Weaving. You will need that extra damage buff from there now. It was already really good in single target, but it's going to be even more important that you use it. And with missing that critical severity from here, you will most definitely want to be running Critical Burn. You were able to, on some builds, use Frigid Winds because you were getting the crit severity from Critical Conflagration, but you're going to have to rebalance some things. He did specify, particularly with Oppressive Force, that he's decreasing the number of hits down to 3, that the total magnitude of each day's hits has been decreased to 400, and the final magnitude hit did get increased up to 500 though. And the tooltip's been updated, it says, to reflect the number of hits. That is indeed correct. But it does mean that, yeah, this power also deals a lot less damage. So what should you be using then out of these daily powers in terms of multi-target? You have Ice Storm, Fury Simulation, Oppressive Force, and Arcane Singularity. With Arcane Singularity Nerf, is it still the best to use? Well, we see our test here, Arcane Singularity. This is against those, again, 5 enemies, nearly 700,000 damage. Pretty much the same as we got the test we just did there. Then you have your Oppressive Force, just over 600,000 damage. Then your Ice Storm, nearly 600,000 damage. And then Fury Simulation, 430,000 damage. And so, yeah, Arcane Singularity still going to come out on top in terms of multi-target damage. Also because its area is 42-foot radius. And everything else has less of a radius. Like Ice Storm only 40. Immolation only 35, Oppressive Force only 25, so it's still really good, and the pull effect is really nice as well. It's just not going to be instant damage. You're not going to be able to cast this and deal the damage right away. It's not going to be as reactive as it was, so if things are dying quickly, you may very well still want to run something different that's going to deal the damage very quickly. So Ice Storm probably. Fury Simulation, I believe, has a target cap issue. Just be aware of that. And Oppressive Force still really good, especially to trigger Shatter Strike if you have control immune enemies. That's it for the wizard changes. More testing will need to be done, but it's definitely been a nerf. Directly with the 10% stat loss, and then throwing on top of that, you can't double proc Enchanter's Hex anymore on these abilities. Enchanter's Hex just in itself has been nerfed. And then also your Arcane Singularity will be dealing like half as much damage, if not less, than it did before. It won't nearly trigger Glowing Flames as much as it did. So ultimately, that's it for now. A bit drastic in my opinion to just instantly strip away the 10% crit severity, because it requires us now to rework builds which were relying on that crit severity to hit those caps. And yeah, we got gear that fit that. We made sure we weren't overcapping it and having too much. And now we got to change everything. Great. I think they could have reduced the damage and the effectiveness in different ways. Just already changing it so that Arcane Singularity can not nearly so much trigger Glowing Flames. They could just change it entirely, make it not trigger Glowing Flames at all, and then leave the crit severity. And that's already a big nerf to Wizard, because the big thing about Wizard is the multi-target damage. Yes, it has good single target damage, and that's still going to be in effect, albeit a little bit less because of the crit severity missing, but its single target damage is still going to be pretty high. Don't worry too much about that. Multi-target damage, on the other hand, they rely a lot on this daily power, is definitely going down a notch. You can say more in line with other classes. With that said, we kind of all knew this was going to happen at some point. Wizard has been loving it the past year since Module 24 and its rework. It is still going to be very good, and you do have the flexibility of being ranged, so don't despair. Again, these changes will only be coming in the future. These are on the preview for testing, but they will most likely come with next week's update. A massive thank you once again to all of these channel members for their continued support, and we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.